friends, Queen of Flannel here. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to our last Halloween video of the month of October. So by the time you guys see this, it will be Halloween, but not our last Halloween video of the season. So let me talk a little bit about the project and what I'm working on and kind of how this came about and what went down. So I was working on another project that I had hoped to have out by Tuesday for our last video of the month, and it was taking me a little bit longer to get through than I thought it would, and I didn't want to rush just to have something to put out for a video on Tuesday. So you guys will get that image, that book, just not in the month of October. So when I realized that I wasn't going to be able to get that image done, I started trying to figure out what my options were, and whether or not there was something that I could do a little bit quicker and still have some content to put out for you guys. So that's how this project came about. So this image is from Etsy. It is from Christine Caron, and it is called the Autumn Forest Witch. It is a grayscale image. You can get it off of her Etsy, and I will link to it in the description below. And so yeah, I was sitting having my morning coffee and trying to figure out over the weekend what am I gonna do. And then I was like, well, hey, I can print now. I got a new printer, so maybe I can find something that I can print out. And then it was, well, hey, you know, markers are generally pretty quick and I enjoy working with the markers, so maybe I could do something with markers. And I'm browsing through Etsy, I find this image, and then I was like, oh, hey, this would work for a couple different things. Erica over at Elm Colors has been doing a series all month. She's calling it Witchtober, and I've wanted to do an image for her hashtag. And up until, you know, here the other day, I didn't have a printer, and so then I was like, oh, hey, this image would work for Erica's hashtag. I can use markers on it. And then I was going through some of my older videos, and I had started back before I left to go out of the country for work, a monochrome challenge series. So I thought, hey, why not do this entire video in orange, in shades of orange? And so with the other monochrome videos, I did it with a bunch of markers. I didn't, you know, limit myself. It was just whatever I grabbed that was in that color. And so with this one, as I went to start picking colors, I realized, hey, why not limit it even more and just do it with a handful of markers? So I dug into my 320 set of Ohuhu alcohol markers, and I grabbed 6 different orange markers. And so that is where this project came from. 6 markers, and actually I think one of them I only used once, so really it ended up being like 5 markers. So right now, what you're seeing me do is I'm going through and blocking in my shadows where I want my darkest areas to be. And this has really become kind of a staple of how I use my alcohol markers. And it depends on the subject, it depends on what I'm doing, it depends on how confident I'm feeling about the project. And segue, I'm going to apologize right now because I see that the camera is having some issues. So I was playing with my new camera and trying to, you know, figure some things out with it. And apparently I accidentally turned on the tracking autofocus. So it has a setting on it where it will lock on to a subject that it thinks has the potential to move. So you'll notice, unfortunately, that as I change the angle of my marker and it's pointed more towards the lens of the camera, that the camera locks focus on it. So I will fix that for next time. I apologize. I don't think it's too horrible, and I did cut out some areas where it went on a little excessively. But anyways, back to my thought process for this. So blocking in my shadows with my darkest marker, this is YR5 Terra Cotta, and I found I really enjoy working this way, working dark to light. Sometimes I will still go through and I will prime an entire area with my lightest color and then apply my darker colors over the top. It just depends on what set of markers I'm using, what color palette I'm using, how I'm feeling about the image. But for this one, since there was a lot of detail and a lot of really tiny areas, I felt like it would be easier for me to go in and block those darker areas out first. And I would suggest, you know, give it a try. Don't use your most expensive, you know, cardstock or an image that you really like. Try it out on something maybe that's, you know, not your favorite, something you're not afraid to, you know, maybe muck up when you're testing this out. But really, I hear a lot of people, and I was like this too, I hear a lot of people that are apprehensive about getting into alcohol markers. I have heard people say that, you know, they're intimidated by alcohol markers, and that's totally common. I get it. They're expensive, so there's kind of that trepidation of, well, I don't want to buy a bunch of alcohol markers and then discover that I don't like the medium, or I can't figure out how to, you know, how to get the results that I want, or that I see other people getting. And I won't get into the whole, like, how to pick, like, how to choose a set of alcohol markers, or if you know, you're getting into Copics, like, what do you buy? That's a whole other topic. But you really just have to play and make mistakes, and, you know, sit back and say, man, this did not come out the way that I wanted it to. Like, what could I do different next time? So I think I'm still at this point, yeah, I'm still blocking in shadows. That's going to go on for a little while before I switch markers. But yeah, if you're just starting out, it's absolutely, I would recommend starting light with your lightest marker and working up to your darks and your shadows as you become more comfortable with the markers, because it's easier to add more to a lighter color than it is to take away if you go too dark. And so, yep, I'm still blocking in those shadows. I'm just trying to track where I am in the video, and I actually did cut out quite a bit of this. I want to say it took me probably 30 to 45 minutes just to get my my shadows, or my base shadows, because I do go in later on and darken some of these areas up even more. This was just kind of, you know, the initial like pass through. And part of the reason I chose to do that on this image also is just, like I said, because there's so much going on, I needed a way to separate some of these elements from each other. So yeah, the camera got a little funky here, and I was messing with some settings, so this really was a fun image to work on. And like I said, I didn't have a specific color palette. Well, I did have a color palette, the 6 markers I pulled out of the bag, but I didn't grab any reference photos or anything like that. I just kind of went with it, and I know that's not the way a lot of people work. I will be 100% honest. I don't often like pre-swatch my supplies before I start on a picture. I think especially if I'm working with a set of pencils or a set of markers or something that I'm really familiar with, I just kind of know how certain colors work together. This one, not quite so much, because there's an area that we'll get to, and I'll let you know when we get there, where I did have some hesitation about my my choices. But now we're back up at the top of the page, and I have moved on. This is actually my second darkest color. This is, I got the markers here on my desk. I believe this was YR180 lipstick orange, and no, we haven't quite gotten there yet. But alcohol markers are definitely one of those mediums where there is a ugly phase as you're, you know, blocking your colors in. But this is my second darkest color, and so I'm kind of using this as a secondary shadow color. So these are the next, I guess, what I would say shaded or darker areas. So, and you'll also notice that I am leaving some white space, and that's where my lighter color and some of the white of the paper I am hoping to leave, and some of those areas end up getting completely filled in. But this was just me trying to plan ahead and think about what spaces I might want to leave as highlights. And as I kind of circle through the colors, you know, some of these spaces I ended up deciding, nope, you know what, let's go ahead and add some color in here. It was just kind of a process, I guess, just working slowly through each area and not trying to, you know, hit the whole like paper, because again, you can only take so much of the alcohol marker away if you mess up, if you go too much, too heavy with your markers. So I'm working on one of the pumpkins now. So there's two or three pumpkins. So there's the one that's on the top of her hat. There's a little one behind it, and then there's one at the bottom. So I think I ended up doing this pumpkin on camera, and then I did I do both of them? I can't remember. I think I may have done all of them on camera. So I did work on some of this off camera, especially on some of the elements where I knew I recorded like half of her shoulder, and to keep the video from being like a million hours, I ended up doing her other shoulder off camera. And so I think this is about the point where I started just, you know, flipping back and forth between markers as I felt like I needed them. And that's just generally, you know, how I approach things. A lot of times I'll go through and I'll lay down one color, and then I'll lay down another color, and then I lay down another color. And when I start getting the majority of the paper filled, I don't tend to work single color, if that makes sense. I will kind of grab what I think I need as I see it. And so that's when it gets really difficult for me when I'm filming, to try and explain what color I'm using, because I hit a point where it's like, okay, I know how these colors interact together. Grab color next, grab color next. So I'll give you guys the full like 6 color combo in the description. And so now we're down at the bottom of the page, and now I'm back up to the middle. This is when I tend to start bouncing around. Okay, so now we're back, and I thought that split was where I started working on things off camera, but apparently not. So now you're gonna see me really start filling in a lot of this white space. I think this was, what color was this? This, I believe, was YR172 Tiger Lily. And this is a pretty pumpkin-y orange color. I really like the way that it turned out on the top of her hat, and it took me a couple passes like in my brain to realize, oh, hey, it's not a tree stump, it's the top of her hat. And so this was where I started kind of second guessing my my color choices, and started wondering if I had picked colors that were too close together in tone. I started, especially around the elements on her hat, between the tree trunk and the brim of the hat, I really started having trouble separating some of the elements from each other, and I felt like it was really just starting to look like one, I'm trying to figure out how to explain this, like one just giant mass of orange stuff. And so that's one of the challenging things about working with a monochromatic palette, but also one of those things that really teaches you how to be aware of your tonal values, because this really could have just ended up looking like a mess. And so this was where I started thinking about how I was going to use the limited markers that I had picked to expand on my values. And so what that kind of means is, like, yeah, I've got 6 markers, but I can get infinite tonal values out of those 6 markers just by how much and how many layers I apply and to wear. So I could take the that dark marker, the Terra Cotta, and apply it in 3 layers in one spot, in 6 layers in another, and get two different values that could look like 2 different colors. And so that was really important as I was working through this, to make it look like a cohesive element, but not like samey same. I feel like I'm not doing a good job explaining this. It's just one of those things that's like, I understand it in my head when I'm doing it, and sometimes it's hard to put into words to explain like what my thought process was. But yeah, it's like right now, and it comes together when I color the rest of the flowers. But right now, the elements on her hat look like there's no separation between them and the brim of the hat. And so the skin tone here was also a challenge. I was really afraid that she was going to come out looking very, very pumpkinish, like way more pumpkinish than I would have liked. And since some of my my darker colors were very, very orange, I opted to try and keep her skin tone to just this lightest color. This is the YR250 Moccasin. And I did end up using one of the darker markers around her eyes, and it kind of freaked me out a little bit. She looked like she had like bags under her eyes. And once it dried, it looked okay, and I did use it, you know, up around her forehead under the hat, and I just really went very conservative around the face. And so now I'm working on some of the hair, and this is the moccasin, the light color for the highlights in her hair. And I still am working to figure out a good system for how to do hair with markers. Like, I'm generally satisfied with the way it turns out in the end, but man, it's hard to keep those highlights. And if you're not working with grayscale to like not lose those details, it's really, really easy to just completely muck up hair with alcohol markers. And so sometimes, like, you'll notice that I tend to move around between various objects on the page. I don't stick with one thing to completion. And some of that is there are times where it looks like funky, and I know for me, when that happens, sometimes I tend to like go at it like a little rougher, a little harder with the markers, and it has been a cognizant like choice on my part. When I start feeling like that, just move to another object, let it sit, let it dry, and then come back to it. Because sometimes when you first lay down the markers and they're really like wet and I don't want to say when they're really wet and juicy on the page and it looks really dark and streaky and gross, it is it is a, you tend to want to just keep going at it to like straighten it out, and sometimes that's not always the best choice, and you end up making it look worse. So if there's one thing I can say is, if you start having that feeling of, I don't like the way this looks, something's not right with it, move to another element on your page and then come back to it a little bit later. I know you hear some people say that it's easier to work with the alcohol markers when they're wet, and that is true in certain instances, but there are also times where I think it is better to just let it go. Walk away, work on something else, come back to it, and see how it looks when it's dry. Because especially with some of the darker colored markers, they dry lighter, so you may end up making more of a hot mess out of something that in the end wouldn't have looked as rough if you just let it be. So now I'm up here working on the brim of her hat, and this was another area where, especially like right up under the hat, I ended up going in with the terracotta more than a few times. I don't remember exactly how many layers I used, but that was definitely one of those spaces where I knew that I needed it to be pretty dark. And of course, I mean, the grayscale on this image helped to give me some of that depth in those shadows up there. And so this was another challenging spot, figuring out how I was going to do the cast shadow on her cloak from this branch. And so this was actually sorry, I just heard the kitten outside my door. It's almost lunchtime. But this is actually like the clasp that's holding her cloak closed. And so I kind of just ended up doing the leaves first, and then just started at the edges and worked my way towards the towards the sleeve. I ended up moving down to her sleeve. Oh, now we're back up to her shoulder. And then right here, I realized that this is actually her skin. And I went a little too dark in there. I wasn't paying attention. I thought it was part of like the cloak or something she was wearing underneath. And so this is just, I'm smoothing out some of these edges right here with the what is it? That's the moccasin. And this is another thing that that I struggle with remembering is sometimes I spend too much time on one section and completely forget that there is a mirror to it, or another half of it. So I did which would be her right shoulder, and I left the left side. And so when you do that, it can be hard to be consistent with your tonal values. If I had done both shoulders at the same time, well, not at the same time, but if I had done one shoulder and then moved over to the other, it probably would have looked a little more consistent, but also the way she's positioned with the lighting, it would look a little different anyways. But that's also one thing to keep in mind, because like if you do one shoulder and then you walk away and you come back and you're like, oh, I didn't jot down what combination of markers I used for this side, and so then you've got to try and like piece together. And I mean, for me, I could have gone back and used the footage from the right shoulder there. I didn't, and I really wasn't that fussed about it. But like, if you're not recording your work, then yeah, you want to make sure that you jot down the combination that you use your markers in, or try and do like that, both of those types of areas like together. These flowers were tricky also, because I didn't want to go too dark with them, but I also wanted them to stand out from the rest of the image. Okay, and so this is where we transitioned. So I did quite a bit here off camera, and I tried to think about the elements that I had already colored with you guys on camera, and so I left the a lot of the little creatures. So we did the bird in one of the first sections of the video, and I left the little frog, and I believe this is a squirrel. And so you'll see me bounce back and forth here between the frog and the squirrel for a minute, and this was just because I wanted to make sure that I got the texture as and the color as good as I could get. So the frog wasn't too difficult, but man, fur with markers, for anybody out there that can do fur with markers, man, I give you props, because it's really difficult. And I can imagine if I was trying to do this with like on my own, like without grayscale and the line work underneath to show through to give me some kind of, you know, indication that it is a furry little animal. So I'm just working back and forth here between, I think this ended up being 3 different markers, and I ended up darkening up his tail and his belly here. And I had previously put down some of these, some of those shadows, and then I ended up darkening certain areas up, and then smoothing some of them out with my lighter color, and then going back in and trying to, you know, not stipple, that's not the right word, but just kind of like pounce the marker rather than do like a flat drag of the brush. I like how he came out in the end, but it's definitely one of the more challenging elements on the page. And so I worked from the outside towards the inside, because I knew that I wanted some highlight areas, lighter areas on his tail and on the outside of his body. And so I used the lighter marker, and just in certain areas just hit it with a couple layers, so it just changed my my tonal values. And so I'm back over to our little frog here, and now I'm moving up to the snail on the underside of her hat. And he was a little challenging too, because I only had, this was the lightest color of marker, and I ended up using it on the underside of the hat and also on the snail. So trying to separate him and make him stand on his own and not as like an attachment of the hat. was challenging, so I took the darkest marker there and went underneath his body along the hat to give him a cast shadow. And I'm just darkening some areas around him, and now we're moving down to the bottom of the page and working on the last pumpkin. My flicking got a little messy here, but it worked out. It worked out in the end. And I wanted to be careful not to completely smooth out some of those edges. I wanted the those harsher lines on this pumpkin. And so we're just darkening up some of those areas on the top and the bottom. And I think this was where, I know I used it in the mushroom, and I think I used a little bit of it on the pumpkin, but this was where I brought in its Y5 Rouge Orange. And this is a pretty red orange. I don't know why I didn't grab this earlier for any other elements. If I was just, oh, it's too red for what I'm trying to do, but for whatever reason, like, I picked this and then I didn't end up using it more than just the once or twice. It just sat on my desk. And so this is just back and forth between these little areas, adding some shadows and some depth in some of these little crevices on this flower. And so I'm just, again, with the lightest marker, using it to darken up some of my lighter areas, but also leave some highlights. And so I really, when I first started this, I went off of the shadow areas that Christine included in the image and used her line work, so I didn't really set a light source for this. And then as I got into it and added, started adding the color and seeing how what I chose looked on the page, I added more depth and more shadows in certain areas where I felt like it needed it. And so I probably could have gone a little darker down behind that mushroom. He does kind of like blend into the background. And so back to the pumpkin. And this is just adding some extra color on some leaves and darkening up some of these stems. And we're starting to wind down here. So this is really, you'll notice me kind of like hesitate a little bit, and really this was just, oh, I forgot Mr. Ladybug. So I finished up the ladybug, and now I'm just kind of sitting back, taking a look at it and doing those last little refinements that I feel like it needs. But for the most part, she's pretty much done, and yep, we're just bouncing back and forth here. And so now we'll come out and give you guys a view of the whole image. And so this is it. This is our autumn forest switch. So thank you guys for coming along on this journey with me. I really appreciate it. I'm really pleased with the way that she turned out. And so, like I said, I will leave the combo and any other information, where I got this image, etc., in the description. And yeah, thank you guys so much. I appreciate all of your support and those who watched. And I will see you guys in the next video.